This is the 7th episode of our series about real, dark crime. On the 2nd of December, 2022, two men were out hunting in the state of Georgia when they were forced to stop and call the police. On the way out toward a large swamp, they had found something they could never have imagined. First, a hunting knife lay on the ground. Then a plastic bag and wet wipes scattered through the terrain. And out in the swamp itself, something floated in the mud. At first they thought it was a plastic mannequin. Then they understood that it was a real human being. It would take the investigators 5 days to find the rest. A woman taken apart and spread across the swamp. Without a name. Without an identity. Without a single thread that led anywhere. This is the story of the woman in the swamp, and of the carefully built lie that nearly buried her forever. But to understand who the woman in the swamp was, we have to start with those who tried to give her a name. One of the first on the scene was Detective Jack Frost. He followed the wet wipes, some of which carried stains of blood, to a plastic basin hidden among the trees. For Frost, the picture was clear. Someone who knew the area had committed a murder here and spread the body across the swamp. The medical examiner determined that the dead person was a woman and that she had injuries, suggesting she had defended herself. But there was nothing that revealed her identity. The police searched every register, questioned those who lived nearby, but no one in the area had been reported missing. As a last resort, they had 2 portraits drawn of the woman's face, and the image was shown on television and online, across the whole country. Hundreds of calls came in, but no one could say for certain who she was. Just as the police were about to give up, a woman called from the state of Virginia, hundreds of miles away. Her name was Heather, and she was certain. The image, she said, looked like her ex-husband's current wife, Mindy Cassotis. But that was impossible, because Mindy was already dead. Had been for a long time. And so was her ex-husband. Both of them, Heather said, had long since passed away. The man's name was Nick, a former Marine officer. And how could a woman who was already dead be murdered? To understand how a living woman could be declared dead, we have to go back to the beginning of their story. Nick Cassotis had been an officer in the Navy and a military lawyer. A charismatic, well-liked man whom people trusted. He and Mindy had met on a dating app, married in 2017, and dreamed of starting a family. Mindy had even begun recording her own podcast about interesting women. Everything looked bright. But then something began to change. According to Mindy's friends, the couple developed security problems because of Nick's military past. They were convinced that someone was after them. So they moved constantly. 3 states in a single year. Mindy almost completely stopped seeing her friends. When she did call, Her voice sounded more and more anxious. She insisted that they could only talk through an encrypted app, so that no one could listen. Nick had said so. She whispered that someone was following her wherever she went, that they were trying to get to Nick, and then she ended the call. What Mindy's friends did not know was how deeply this fear would pull her down. It was not an outside threat. It was a net, drawn tighter and tighter around her, thread by thread, until there was no way out. And at the center of that net stood the man she trusted most. The net drew tighter, month by month. Mindy told her friends that a hacker group had emptied their bank accounts, that they were completely without money, and that their lives were in danger. All of it, she said, was a consequence of secret missions Nick had been part of in the Navy. An intelligence agency had even, according to her, placed a surveillance vehicle on their street to protect them. When she last spoke with her friend Angela, she did not even dare to go outside. The people pretending to be gardeners out front, she said, were really setting up cameras around the house. While Mindy shut herself further and further inside, someone else was desperately trying to reach Nick. His ex-wife, Heather, had a claim against him. $1.5 million after the divorce, which he had never paid. But in 2 years, she had not managed to find out where he lived, because the couple moved almost every week, sometimes between notary offices and short-term rentals. Finally, Heather hired a private investigator. A court issued an arrest warrant against Nick, and his military law license was revoked. In the middle of all this, Nick and Mindy were celebrating something in their house in Savannah. Mindy was pregnant. When she called Angela to tell her, she was overjoyed because they had wanted a child for so long. But what Angela did not know was that this would be her last call with Mindy. Because shortly after, the carefully built lie would claim its first victim. A few months later, Nick called Angela with news she could not take in. Mindy had been home alone, had an accident, and was taken to the hospital. And when he arrived, she was already dead. Angela wanted to travel to Savannah for the funeral at once, but Nick declined. Because of their security situation, a public ceremony would be too risky. So he would cremate her instead of burying her. A healthy, young, pregnant woman, suddenly gone, with no body to say goodbye to. And as if that were not enough, the next message soon came. Nick himself had died in a car accident. His family confirmed it, and an email went out to everyone that Nick was dead. In only a few weeks, 2 people had been erased from the world, without remains, without funerals, without proof. But Detective Frost did not believe in coincidences. The DNA from the swamp matched Mindy, 100%, so she was clearly the dead woman. And if Mindy was real, perhaps his death was also a lie. Frost dug further and found that there had never been any recorded car accident. Nick was alive, under a new name, in Pennsylvania, several states away. He had married a third time, to a woman he had told he was a widower. The man who had died twice now sat at a new kitchen table, in a new life, as if nothing had happened. In May 2023, Nick was brought to Georgia for questioning. The well-dressed, charismatic officer was gone, and what remained was a gaunt man one could barely recognize. In front of Frost, he repeated the same story his wife had once told her friends. People connected to his secret work for the Pentagon had hunted them, and an FBI agent named Jim McIntyre had taken over their entire lives. For 4 years, Nick said, they had done exactly everything that man ordered. And if anyone had killed Mindy, it was Jim. But the agent, Jim McIntyre, did not exist. The FBI had no employee by that name. The only Jim McIntyre the investigators could find in the area was an older man who sold dental implants, with no connection to Nick at all. The invisible pursuer, the prison of fear that had ruled Mindy's final years, Nick had built with his own words. The evidence took over, where the lie ran out. A green Ford Explorer that Nick had owned was caught on a gas station camera on the road toward the swamp. The hunting knife at the scene had been bought with his credit card at a hardware store, and the surveillance camera had caught him walking away with it. A knife set from a fishing shop near the swamp was bought with the same card, and his phone had pinged right by the swamp that same day. Despite all of this, Nick swore he was innocent and pointed, right to the very end, at the agent who had never existed. He was convicted of the murder of his wife. What really happened the day Mindy died, we may never know. But the motive is not hard to guess. Debts he could not pay. A life he could no longer hold together. And a wife who knew too much. What Nick gave Mindy was not safety, but an invisible enemy to fear, so that she would never see the real one. The next time someone asks you to trust them, and only them, and says the whole world is out to get you, ask yourself, who really benefits from your fear? We will see you in the next episode.